When Jasmine Crockett calmly walked through a timeline of verified government documents exposing deep-rooted misconduct, Karoline Leavitt didn't argue. She panicked, and she called the cops. What followed wasn't supposed to be a scandal. Just another Thursday night panel on government accountability, filmed live from a modest studio in Arlington, Texas. 4 lawmakers, 1 moderator. No surprises. Jasmine had been added to the panel last minute after a colleague pulled out. No rehearsed talking points, just her usual arsenal. Color-coded folders, a stack of highlighters, and a memory so sharp it cut through. Noise like glass. The lights hummed overhead. Paul Linfield, the moderator, gray suit, grayer personality, prone to interrupting women more than men, gave his usual opener. Lively but respectful, folks. Jasmine didn't blink. She adjusted. Her mic smiled faintly and said into the camera, "Transparency isn't a slogan. It's a promise, and someone's been breaking it." 2 seats down, Karoline exhaled, loudly. Her mic caught it. C-SPAN wasn't built for drama, but tonight, something was in the air. Jasmine had come with receipts, slim folders, names, dates. Redacted memos already in the public domain. Nothing classified, just things the media had conveniently ignored. She began with March 12th. A memo from the Office of Presidential Scheduling showed a private meeting with 3 unnamed energy execs, none of whom were on official White House visitor logs. That meeting? It happened 24 hours before an unprecedented rollback on federal environmental penalties. Karoline stiffened. "Are you implying corruption in the Oval Office?" she asked, trying and failing to sound calm. Jasmine didn't even glance her way. "I'm quoting public documents, Karoline." Paul, attempting damage control, interjected, "Congresswoman, just to clarify, are you alleging—" "I'm saying the facts are right here." "They don't need help speaking." Karoline's fingers curled into a fist. She wasn't used to losing control. Not like this. But Jasmine didn't need to raise her voice. She referenced a second document, a timeline tying policy shifts directly to donor money. Her tone sharpened, but just enough to signal this wasn't theory, it was evidence. Mapped, sourced, deliberate. Karoline snapped. "You're playing with fire." Jasmine looked up for the first time. "No, I'm telling the truth. If that sets something on fire, maybe it deserved to burn." The control room went silent. 5 seconds of stillness, enough to feel like an hour. Then, "Let's take a quick break," Paul mumbled. The show cut to commercial. Inside the studio, chaos. Karoline turned, eyes locked on Jasmine. "You think this is a game? You just revealed classified information on national television. That's criminal." Jasmine, cool as ever. "Nothing I said was classified. Check the Federal Register." Karoline shot up so fast her earpiece hit the floor. "You'll regret this." Producers rushed in to separate them. Jasmine's documents scattered across the table. A nervous assistant reached for them, but Jasmine waved her off. "Let them read it." Karoline stormed into the hallway, dialing fast. Her voice echoed. "Yes, Capitol Police. I need to report a national security breach." The sound team froze. Jasmine didn't move. She just watched her leave and said, calm and clear, "This is how truth gets treated now." But Karoline's next move detonated the entire room. Millions watching had no idea what just happened off air. All they saw was a jump cut to a tire ad and a theme song way too cheerful for what had gone down. But inside the studio, the storm had already broken. A junior producer whispered, "She called the cops?" A legal intern texted someone at corporate. Meanwhile, Jasmine stayed seated, quiet, processing, strategic. What she didn't know yet was that Karoline's phone call would launch a chain of events far bigger than anyone in that studio could control. In the hallway, Karoline barked into her phone. "No, I don't care if it was technically public. She connected dots that shouldn't be connected." The Capitol Police dispatcher reportedly asked her 3 times to specify what law had been broken. She couldn't. She just repeated, "Reckless disclosures and public endangerment." Back in the studio, Paul looked like he'd seen a ghost. She just made it 10 times worse. Jasmine finally stood. "Someone call my chief of staff. He'll want to get ahead of this." Karoline returned 10 minutes later, gripping her phone like a courtroom exhibit. "You're going to regret opening your mouth tonight." Jasmine didn't flinch. "You're going to regret using the police to cover up what you can't refute." Producers jumped in. "Cut the rest of the segment." Phones are already lighting up. Alondra Greer, the executive producer, nodded. "We'll get you to your car safely, Congresswoman." Jasmine chuckled, dry, tired. "Let me guess, I'm the threat now?" Outside, the air was thick. Local. Reporters had already heard something went down. One intern from a college paper live-streamed the parking lot. Still unclear what caused the show to end early. Jasmine didn't speak. She climbed into her car. Noel, her chief of staff, was already texting. "Capitol Police are asking for a voluntary interview, just protocol, but they're rattled." Jasmine replied, "Let them dig. Everything I said is public record." But Noel wasn't reassured. "They don't care what's public. They care you embarrassed someone." By midnight, the clip went viral. A freelance producer had recorded the feed from her laptop. The moment Jasmine quoted the energy memo. Karoline's reaction, the tension, the cut to black. It spread like wildfire. Twitter, TikTok, YouTube. The hashtag #SheRead began trending. Cable networks scrambled. Most blurred her documents. But the questions had already taken hold. Why did the show cut mid-sentence? What had Jasmine really said? And why had Karoline called the police? The Capitol Police responded, not with handcuffs, but with a formal inquiry. A voluntary conversation was requested. Jasmine wasn't surprised. She was just calculating. Her office turned down MSNBC and CNN. She wasn't ready to speak. Not yet. Karoline, meanwhile, went into overdrive. She released a statement late Friday night accusing Jasmine of reckless endangerment and exploiting public trust. But by sunrise, the blowback had begun. 2 veteran reporters, Politico's Allison Baird and Reuters' Marcus Lynn, fact-checked every quote, every document, every reference. All of it checked out. Public, legal, documented. The receipts were airtight. Jasmine's camp forwarded those receipts to every network. Still, she stayed silent. Online, viewers were dissecting her performance like legal scholars. One TikTok creator called Karoline's meltdown the moment spin met its match. Even conservatives began to waver. Rep. Glenn Royden tweeted, "Whether you agree with Rep. Crockett or not, calling the police on a sitting member of Congress for citing documents. Not okay." The silence was working. When Jasmine returned to Capitol Hill, reporters were waiting. She walked past them. Inside, Noel handed her a folder. "Legal says we should go on the offensive." Jasmine stared out the window. She thought I'd cry, or back down, or fold. Noel watched her. "But you won't." "I grew up in South Dallas," Jasmine said. "This isn't my first fire, but Karoline's about to find out what happens when you try to put one out with gasoline." By Sunday, the tide had turned. A CBS panel featuring former intelligence officer Richard Ames cut through the noise. Nothing she said was classified. Frankly, more Americans should be reading this stuff. His clip hit 4 million views. Inside Jasmine's office, phones rang non-stop. Teachers, organizers, even old political opponents called to say the same thing. "You were right," Noel smiled. "If she hadn't tried to silence you, no one would have paid attention." "Exactly," Jasmine said. She gave the story legs. Sunday night, Jasmine made her next move. She didn't call a pundit. She called Amari Denson, an investigative reporter from Columbus. the kind who chased facts, not clicks. "I need you to see something," she said. An hour later, Amari sat on Jasmine's floor, flipping through every document. "You said all of this on air?" "Every word." Amari nodded. "Then I'm running everything. The dates, the trail, the names. Not just what you said, but what they wanted hidden. What came next wasn't flashy. It was precise. Amari's article, the broadcast breakdown. What Jasmine Crockett actually said, dropped Monday morning. Over 3,000 words. Every source linked. Every claim verified. It exploded. One tweet read, "This should be required reading in every civics class." Another, "Karoline made the worst mistake you can make. She called the cops on the wrong woman." Jasmine's team released her statement shortly after. It was calm, direct. "I did not leak classified information. I cited documents every American has access to. If that's a threat, then we need to ask what kind of democracy we're living in." The final line hit hardest. "When women like me, black women, raise our voices, we're met with fear. But facts don't flinch." By that night, Karoline's support crumbled. Even her usual media allies started backpedaling. Fox News asked, "Did Karoline Leavitt overreact?" She wasn't just losing the argument. She was losing the room. Back at home, Jasmine told Noel quietly, "They're already trying to spin this into identity politics, like I just got lucky with a good line." "You didn't get lucky," he said. "You brought proof." And Washington knew it. Phones were ringing in the West Wing. In a closed-door room, Trump's comms team huddled, fuming. "She never raised her voice," one aide said, replaying the clip. "She made it sound normal." "Worse," another added. "She made it sound true." Polls were shifting. Jasmine's favorability jumped 12 points with independents. Interviews flooded in. ABC, NBC, 60 Minutes. She declined them all. Instead, she flew to Toledo, held a town hall, wore jeans and a blazer, answered every question. One woman stood up. "I didn't vote for you, but I watched. And I just want to know." "Why are they scared of people reading documents?" Jasmine smiled. "Because if we start reading," she said, "we stop believing the people who tell us it's too complicated." The quote exploded again. Karoline? She went on a podcast, tried to spin, called Jasmine's facts selectively weaponized. But even her own party started distancing, and finally, from the Resolute desk, Trump responded. "We've seen a lot of dishonest people lately," he said into the camera. "Some in Congress pretend to know more than they do." But it was too late. America was already watching something else. Receipts, and a woman who never raised her voice, but still changed. The story. It was calculated, partisan, and dangerously transparent. He didn't name her. He didn't need to. But the internet noticed. A split-screen clip made the rounds. Jasmine Crockett holding up a public document, calm and resolute. Donald. Trump waving his hand and ranting about dishonest people. Nobody had to explain it. People connected the dots, and a lot of them didn't like what they saw. Even conservative columnist Peter Lang wrote a piece titled, "When Truth Makes You Nervous, Maybe You're the Problem." In her D.C. office, Jasmine saw it like everyone else, just a push notification. She didn't flinch, just glanced at the screen, then looked up at Noel. "He's testing me," she said. Sade, sitting across from her, leaned forward. "So what are you going to do?" Jasmine stood up. "I'm going to respond. My way, my terms." And when she did, unscripted and raw, it cut deeper than anyone on that stage expected. No banners, no flags, no dramatic buildup. Just a folding chair set up in a civic center in Bethesda. Not a symbolic location, just a quiet, accessible space where every camera crew that requested access could fit. Reporters filled the chairs. More lined the walls. Independent media, student journalists, even podcasters showed up. No handlers. No staffers feeding her lines. Noelle and Sade watched quietly from the back. Jasmine stepped up to the mic, cleared her throat, and looked around. "I won't take long," she began. "But I will be clear." Silence. What happened last week wasn't just a reaction. It wasn't just politics. It was an attempt, a public one, to turn truth into threat. She let that hang. I was invited to speak on transparency, and I did that. I quoted public documents, documents that belong to every American, because I still believe that sunlight is the best disinfectant. No teleprompter, just her voice, clear, intentional. But when people hear truth they recognize, that's when they get nervous. Not because they doubt it, but because it confirms something they'd rather bury. A few reporters scribbled faster. Others nodded. The scariest part wasn't the lie. It was how quickly someone tried to use law enforcement to shut me up. Think about that. A sitting member of Congress called the police, not because I lied, not because I threatened anyone, but because I made truth uncomfortable. Shutters clicked in rhythm. You don't have to like my politics. That's not the point. This is about whether we allow fear and power to dictate what facts are safe to say out loud. If quoting a government document gets me dragged, then what are we even doing here? She shifted, firmer now. I'm not walking it back. I'm not apologizing. And I'm not letting anyone rewrite the rules because they didn't like how the truth made them feel. And then came that line. If the truth scares you so badly that you call the cops, maybe you're the one who should. Be investigated. A collective inhale from the room. Cameras zoomed in. Sade closed her eyes. Noelle whispered, "That's the one." Jasmine wasn't done. I've been called angry, loud, every coded word they can think of. But the one thing I've never been, and never will be, is silent. No theatrics. No shouting. Just unwavering resolve. I don't care about theater. I care about accountability. And if you think dragging my name through the mud will stop me, you haven't been paying attention. She stepped back from the mic. No questions. No follow-up. Just a bow of her head and an exit through a side door. The clip hit YouTube within minutes. Newsrooms chopped it into viral pieces before she even got to her car. By nightfall, think pieces were everywhere. The power of silence broken. From receipts to rebellion. Why this moment matters. But Jasmine didn't go home. She and Noelle drove to a late-night meeting with two progressive colleagues. She wasn't planning a media tour. She was building something deeper, quieter, harder to erase. Meanwhile, the White House responded, with precision. A press release at 6 a.m. titled, "Maintaining National Unity in the Face of Political Disinformation." No names. But everyone knew who it was aimed at. The release accused unnamed members of Congress of weaponizing transparency, of mischaracterizing executive processes for political gain. The phrase that stood out? National Security Narratives, Jasmine. Saw it on her way to a breakfast with education advocates in Silver Spring. She read it twice. Noelle sighed as he scrolled. They're doubling down. They have to, she said. They sold the lie. Now they've got to protect it. Right wing. Media latched on immediately. Commentators called her reckless, attention-hungry, even dangerous. One anchor said, "We're watching transparency become terrorism." But the backlash wasn't one-sided anymore. Mainstream journalists began asking questions. What exactly had she misrepresented? What security was threatened? Where was the lie? Nobody had a good answer. Then, around 1 p.m., a leak, a memo from inside the White House counsel's office, published by the Philadelphia Record. It admitted what the world already suspected. Nothing Jasmine cited broke classification rules. 1. Line said it all. The greater concern is the narrative building through legally available documentation. Not criminal, just inconvenient. That memo changed everything. Suddenly, the White House looked petty. Suddenly, Jasmine's critics looked scared. In her office, Jasmine sat at the table, hands folded. Sade held the memo in one hand, water in the other. Even their lawyers admit you broke no rules. Noel nodded. And now everyone else knows. Jasmine wasn't smiling. They're not done. They don't lose quietly. You want to stay ahead? Noel asked. I want them to walk away with fewer lies than they started with, every single time. That night, Jasmine did something rare. She posted a video to her own page. No. Crew. No edits, just her and her phone. I've said what I needed to say on stage, she said. But for the people wondering what the hell is going on, here it is. I didn't commit a crime. I didn't leak anything. I told the truth, using records you could have found yourself. And if that truth scared them, that says more about them than me. 2 minutes, over 2 million views by morning. Meanwhile, Karoline Leavitt's feeds had gone quiet. Her team issued a single tweet. We stand by our concern for public safety. No press, no interviews, no apologies, but behind the scenes, staffers were panicking. One anonymously told a reporter, "We didn't expect it to blow back like this." It did. By Friday, some of Leavitt's allies were urging silence. One aide was caught on a hot mic. If this is a distraction play, they picked the wrong opponent. But it wasn't just political. It was personal. Jasmine's office was flooded. Voicemails, emails, handwritten letters from teachers, veterans, students, parents, not talking about policy, talking about principle. One said, I don't even agree with you most days, but this, you were right. Another from Cheyenne. I haven't voted since 2008, but I will now, for anyone who doesn't fold. Jasmine read that one aloud. She doesn't even like me, she smiled, but she respects that I didn't flinch. Noel held up a clip, a Republican town hall in Missouri. A man said, I didn't vote for Crockett, didn't know her name last week, but if reading a memo makes you a criminal, maybe the problem isn't her. Applause followed. This wasn't about talking heads. It was about regular people, tired of being lied to. Tired of leaders hiding behind buzzwords. Then came the rally. It wasn't a campaign move. It started with a Facebook group. By Saturday, 3,000 people were outside the same civic center. Signs read, Truth isn't a crime. Reading is not. Treason. One woman laminated the memo and wore it like a badge. Jasmine didn't attend. She didn't need to. She watched the live stream from her office. At the White House, aides were panicking. She's becoming a symbol, one said, and we can't spin that. Back in her office, Jasmine was already at work, meeting with ethics groups, discussing legislation to protect public access to documents. Meanwhile, Capitol Hill was buzzing, not about her, but about Karoline. Lawmakers began floating the idea of a hearing on misuse of police power for political purposes. Karoline stayed silent. Even right-wing media stopped defending her. Jasmine didn't take a victory lap. She went to work. That Monday, the building felt different, lighter, focused. She called a meeting. Whole team in the room. She stood with a legal pad. Here's what we're doing. Legislation to protect whistleblowers and public records. Prohibit political use of police power between members. Build a permanent online archive of public records cited on air. This isn't about clapping back, she said. This is about making truth sustainable, without requiring courage every damn time. Later that afternoon, she stepped outside. Reporters leaned forward, expecting fire, drama, a soundbite. Instead, she smiled. No speech today, just wanted you to know we've drafted a bill. What's it about? One asked, making sure what happened last week doesn't happen. Again, are you pressing charges against Leavitt? Another asked. Jasmine paused. No, I'm just doing my job. Something she should have done. Then she walked back inside, not loud, not viral, but real. And that's what people were craving. The reaction? Swift. Advocacy groups praised it. Even some Republicans said, yeah, this is worth a look. One tweet put it best. She didn't just bring receipts, she turned them into policy. By week's end, her approval ticked up, but more importantly, expectations shifted. People started wanting more from their leaders. At a school in Fort Wayne, a student asked, "How do you stay calm when people lie about you?" Jasmine answered softly, "Because truth never needed permission to be true. And it never will." Later, on the curb, she turned to Noel. "You think people will remember this?" He nodded. Maybe not the details, but how it felt. Yeah. And that's all she needed. Because when you refuse to fold, you don't just defend the truth. You remind people what it should look like, and that's something no press cycle can erase.